Good evening and welcome. My name is Robert Clark and I'm pleased to be the president of Historic Annapolis. Our organization, along with the city, will be leading this effort and we're excited that you're here. It's my understanding that the mayor is at another event and will be joining us shortly. In the meantime, let me speak on behalf of both Historic Annapolis and the city and say that we thank you for being here this evening and being part of the larger process. A main component of this process will be community involvement. While we're on a tight schedule this evening, the public will have many opportunities in the coming months to collaborate with the City Dock Action Committee and the working teams. In fact, we've already scheduled to meet with Ward 1 Residents Association April 2nd. I would especially like to thank and recognize two elected officials who are here this evening. My favorite alderwoman, Kelly Tierney's here, and former Mayor Dick Hiller. And Ross Arnett, my favorite. We have a few Historic Annapolis board members here as well. Our board chair, Bill Carday, Jane Campbell-Chambliss, our secretary, Jim Reed, our vice chairman, Chris John, Joe Rubino, Jim O'Hare, are all here to be part of this process. As you may have noticed this morning, I had a nice conversation with Rick Hutzel yesterday about all things City Dock. You may have seen his editorial this morning. We talked about the countless past studies, the recent ULI report that we've assembled, and we have a bunch of people now that are going to weigh in on all of that, which includes you. And he reminded me that these conversations are not new. In fact, in 2015, he bragged, the Capitol ran a series called Visions of Annapolis, the Future of the City. As if no time has passed, the issues are largely the same. Flooding, parking, economic viability, preservation, and the intelligent use of resources. Now in 2019, it's time for a change. Time to build consensus after some thoughtful dialogue. It's time for some action. Two key issues that we're grappling with have been around forever and will be here until we solve them. Parking and flooding. But it does appear through new technologies that the solutions may be here in hand. And the people specializing in that in this room will solve that. We were talking, Rick and I, and we were speculating how many people from the Baltimore, Washington area, or Millersville, or Crofton, or Arnold, that planned on coming downtown Annapolis for dinner or for the day, and it was flooded. They didn't know it was flooded until they got here. They never came back, because there's no way they would know if it was flooded the day they were planning on coming. And we've all seen the parking challenges. And apparently they're with technology and the rebuild of Hillman Garage, maybe the solution is in hand. You'll see that this plan that is set forth is going to move fast. This large group will only meet a few times. Much of the work will be done in the smaller groups that you see here around these tables. Come fall, we intend to have an implementation plan. While the group may seem large, hopefully we've been thoughtful in our assembly of varied subject matter experts. The issues at hand are complex and diverse. We know that Annapolis is a passionate community comprised of a lot of stakeholders and special interests. There's so much expertise in our community that we can draw upon, and so many studies that we can build from. As I mentioned before, the path moving forward will be informed by public input, and we will work cooperatively with the city staff to ensure that the implementation strategy works within the broader governmental framework. I firmly believe that we are stewards, chartered to preserve the integrity of our district and our heritage, as we help craft changes that make our community even more vibrant and economically robust. This is an exciting time in the history of Annapolis and in the history of City Dock. Our successors are counting on us to get this right. As Rick noted in his editorial, this time is different. It's a journey worth taking, and we thank you for being part of it. Now I'd like to turn the mic over to Bryce Turner, who will speak about the Urban Land Institute panel and how it came to be. Bryce has become a really good friend of Annapolis, and in a relatively short period of time. The reason why he's a good friend of Annapolis is because simply he gets it. The folks at the ULI Baltimore chapter handpicked Bryce to lead the TAP because they believe he understood what makes Annapolis special. Bryce is the president and CEO of BCT Architects of Baltimore. and an AIA Fellow. He served as the chair of the ULI Baltimore office and the State of Maryland Sustainable Growth Commission. He has extensive experience designing spaces for people to congregate that creates authentic experiences. We're pleased to have you part of the Action Committee. Welcome back, Bryce.
Is this working also?
Yes.
Working, yeah, okay. Because I may need hands-free while I'm at the mic here. Thank you very much, Robert. I really appreciate it. And this is exciting. We only get one chance for a kickoff meeting, and here it is. Okay, so, you have been asked to provide input and be a part of this, and so this is it. We're starting, ground zero. I've been involved in 5 or 6 of these ULI TAP panels, which are technical advisory panels. They operate at the national level, and then also at the Baltimore or district council level. This was a Baltimore TAP, actually. And I have to tell you, each one of those that I have been a part of, we've called back a month or 2 later, hey, anything happening? Usually often silence, nothing's happening. Call back a year later, hey, anything happening? We did one in Dallas, and the mayor said, no, that mall we looked at, nothing's really happened, the political climate's not right, this or that. But this is incredibly exciting because I didn't have to call anyone. I've gotten countless phone calls since the TAP about how we move forward with this. And I'm very pleased to be a part of that. I want to thank all of you for being here and for volunteering your time. We're all volunteers here, and it's very exciting. We can move this thing forward. So I want to jump right into a couple of the results that came out of the TAP that I think all of you should be aware of. First of all, with any good TAP, you get 8 to 10 to 12 great people to be a part of it. And we were really lucky here. We had transportation experts such as Ian Banks and Ed Myers. We had developers, Michael Beatty, who's here tonight and is going to be a big part of maybe finance and the design committee, and many thanks to Michael. David Bramble, Andrew Brown. Andrew is from the Washington District Council, actually, but he joined us on this. Eric Evans is a financial real estate guy who had a lot of helpful information for us. Matt Hutton was our young leader. We had to have a little bit of diversity on the team. Matt came in and helped us put together the PowerPoint that we presented on the second night. Aaron Keel, an environmental guy who's done a lot of work here in Anne Arundel County. And incredible historic preservation people, Rodney Little and Tom Mays. Lastly, from Easton Economic Development Commission, we had Tracy Ward, who was very helpful from a jurisdictional financial tool perspective, and Rob Sloop, who is from the West Coast, but he's working currently on the West Coast. He's from Anne Arundel County. He's a resiliency expert, really helpful guy. He knew a lot about what's going on. We could call upon him to help going forward. Scott Reichel with the landscape design firm of Mahan Reichel, who had helped us doing a lot of the drawings in the charrette portion of this. So also with the city, and I see Mayor Buckley has joined us. Hello, Mayor Buckley. Historic Annapolis has been incredible working with the city to make this happen, and the mayor's staff has been very accommodating, providing a lot of resources to us. The National Trust for Historic Preservation, which helped to make this happen, Preservation Maryland as well. A great team, a lot of people, too many people to identify, Alderwoman Tierney. Many thanks to all of you. So the way that the TAP really operated is that it really is a 2-day effort. October 23rd, 24th, I believe it was. But we had a lot of research to do ahead of time. We had a lot of reports to read. We went through a lot of the information that the city of Historic Annapolis had provided. So it was more than just those 2 days. A lot of good background work has been done, as you know. We have master plans with lots of reports. This is a report that we do not want to leave sitting on a shelf. and it's really important that we implement and follow through with these things. I'm very impressed with Eileen Fogarty and her organization skills in making this happen. Eileen will be presenting in a few minutes, but we're going to get a lot done in a couple of months here. This is not about taking years. This is about getting things done in just a couple of months, and it will take, of course, years to get some things happening, but not 5 years, not 10 years. There's some low-hanging fruit that we can get done quickly. So I want to go through 7 findings that we had with the report. And I'm not going to ask how many people here have read the report, because I don't want anybody to lie or be embarrassed. But if you get a chance, read at least the executive summary of it, because that really says, has a lot of the meat of the report. So number 1, the findings that we had: identify leadership, make it investments, use financial tools initiated by the city. So what we're talking about are TIFs, a financial toolkit of other types of things like TIFs. There are a number of state grants, a lot of great information out there. I'm amazed as I sit on the Sustainability Commission for the state of Maryland that these things go unused at the end of the year. There is money available for things exactly what we're talking about. Number 2, encourage new development at the city's waterfront with a high level of quality while respecting an American treasured seaport. This is not an anti-growth, anti-development group. I think all of us want to see things happen. We want to see some development, but it needs to be of a high quality. And that's what really makes the difference when you look at some of the great examples that we'll see in a few minutes. Initiate remote parking with user-friendly information and parking rates while evaluating feasible traffic alternatives. This, I think, is also an easy one. People are willing to park and shuttle in if they just know how to do it quickly, rather than circling for parking spaces. I think there's a lot of opportunities, just being able to get information to people who are coming into town. It's been very successful in other places. Create a green park as a way of linking the market house to the water's edge. You know, right now there's nothing compelling about the parking lot at City Dock that makes you want to walk anywhere really there, and that's an easy one for us to attain. Number 5, explore a rich variety of new programming options to attract all Annapolitans. So obviously, you know, every weekend there should be something going on there, and I think this is also an easy one. We want to attract a very diverse group of folks here, young and old, etc. And so I think this is something that can be done easily, really low-hanging fruit. Number 6, implement the approved resiliency plan and develop additional policies to address rising seawater. There's been some good work done. The south side of City Dock, there's some things already in place, homes that are being put in. We need to do more, and we can build that into the development and construction that happens around City Dock. And there's a couple of ways we'll talk about later to see that. And lastly, number 7, the reason we're here: establish a public-private steering committee to guide reinvestment while ensuring stakeholder engagement and process transparency. So that was the last recommendation. That is this action committee. And this is what we want to have happen here tonight. Really kick it off and get it moving. So with that, I'm going to pass it along to Eileen to get into next steps.
Mayor Buckley is going to welcome you since he just joined us.
Sorry I'm late. We just did an event at the Market House and it was packed, which is a good thing to see for our city dock. Just let my glasses on here. Well, first of all, thank you so much for all being here today. Obviously, every person in this room cares about the city of Annapolis. They're willing to give hours and hours of free time to help us come up with a solution for something that we know, we all agree on, we could do a lot better at. So we all agree that 150 car parking lot on the Primus real estate in the city of Annapolis is probably not the best use of it. And so we've had some good traction, and we're looking forward to partnering with Historic Annapolis. We had a great meeting with the governor's office, yesterday. It looks pretty positive that they're going to surplus the Burtis house to us, and we can restore the Burtis house using the guidelines that we've been given, and we can move forward in potentially putting the harbour master in there, the bathroom, some other kind of things that will open up that whole space and open up the possibilities and the sight lines of City Dock. So that was really, really good news. I want to welcome members of the public who are here in attendance as well. Thank you for attending. I'm Gavin Buckley, the Mayor of Annapolis. You are here because City Dock needs your help. Actually, City Dock has needed all of our help for a very long time. But you represent the first real opportunity in a long time to do something meaningful. Action Group is a fitting name because my hope for this group is to be the springboard to action on City Dock. And I hope for this to happen in a relatively short period of time. By fall, we hope to have action items delivered to the City Council. That's an ambitious task, but I really think there's so much talent in this room that we can do that. Robert?
Here.
All right. I hope you told everyone about our bromance.
I did.
Robert and I spend a lot of time together. We have got an official first Tuesday of the month meeting, and I think that what's come out of this is we realize we have so much in common. There's so much that we all want to achieve in this space, and I really, really believe this is the moment that we are going to get here. This is not a group that is just here to do another study. This group hasn't been brought together just to do a study. This group is here to implement the ideas of the ULI, so to actually be an action committee. Robert has already detailed the tasks in front of you, and you are in a very capable hands with Eileen Fogarty. She enjoys she is a masochist, so please. But I do want to thank both of them for their partnership. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Eileen, and everyone in Historic Annapolis, Preservation Maryland, the Urban Land Institute, and National Trust for Historic Preservation. I want to talk a moment about good government. One of the hallmarks of a really good government at any level, local, state, federal, is participation. Active, civic, citizen participation. This committee may be big and seem like a large ship, but when maybe something a dinghy could do, but I believe, but in order to get this right, in order to ensure that City Dock works for everyone in our community, as well as the visitors to our city, we need the input of a large swath of stakeholders. Your meeting in smaller working teams that report to an action group will be helpful in managing workflows. We need stakeholders, and you are those with the subject matter expertise. This isn't always going to be an easy conversation. In fact, there may be conflict and disagreement. I trust that. As adults, you'll find ways to work through those and arrive at decisions that benefit the city. Truth is, you're not going to agree on everything. That would be absurd to think that all of you will agree on every single thing that we are doing. What I'm asking you is to keep an open mind and to stick with it. You've got to have a voice in the future use of this crown jewel of the historic district. When you hit a difficult patch, and you will, take a deep breath, think of the greater good, and think about how you can be flexible in your thinking to arrive at compromise. My wife and son are big fans of the musical Hamilton. We just got back from New York. Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson did not get along. At cabinet meetings and in private settings, they fought about everything. Big things like we're about the seat of government, about how to handle debt that was accumulated during the Revolutionary War. But in the end, the rancor was immaterial to the founding of our system of government that has lasted 243 years. I'm asking you to put on your Hamilton hats and your Jefferson hat, and not your Aaron Burr hat, and get this done for the future of our city. As George Washington said to Alexander Hamilton in Act 1, I know that greatness lies within you. But remember, from here on in, history has its eyes on you. Thank you so much, and I will step aside. Thank you.
Well, I think you've had enough welcomes, so I'll keep my welcome short. The message that you hear from Robert, that you hear from Bryce, that you hear from the mayor is the same. And the message is that we are all here to actually get something done. And there has been some momentum since the time that the ULI TAP took place. The TAP was in October, the report was released in January. And what's amazing, in addition to the partnership between the city and Historic Annapolis, has been that all of you, look around, all of you have committed your time and your effort. That has really taken place over the last month, is reaching out to people with expertise and stakeholders. And when we look at this group, you see longtime residents, longtime Annapolitans. We have some people who just moved here. We have a bunch of people from the maritime community. We have bike enthusiasts. We have artists and musicians. We have experts in finance, experts in resiliency, experts in parking. We have a bunch of architects, landscape architects, and we have advocacy groups, preservation, environment. So let's look around this room. We have the talent, we have the energy, and we are going to be able to do, over the next couple of months, we're going to be able to empower the city to move forward. You know, you say, well, what are we going to, let's just take a look at the aerial that's on all of your tables. This is our city dock. Look at it. You've got blacktop. You've got 5 or 6 trees that I count. You have blacktop. You have parking, you have meters. You really have, when you go to some old industrial cities, we have what an old industrial city would have as their sort of back of house waterfront that's not been brought into the 70s or the 80s, much less 2019. So let's look at some of the specifics. This is what the alleys look like. This is what the walkways look like. Obviously they don't connect. Let's take a look at the next one. Our biggest challenge, in addition to this hardscape, no shade, uninviting, unkept area, our biggest challenge is that, look at those numbers. In 1969, we had 3.8 days that we flooded on City Dock. 2013, we had 38.5 days. 2019, we'll have 52 days, and 2065, we'll have 365 days. So that, we have to address this issue, or we are not going to have a city dock. Everyone's talked about the plans. This is just a timeline from 1987. There are plans certainly before then. The maritime strategy and zoning. The Ward 1 sector plan, 1990. The comprehensive plan, 2009. The ULI TAP for City Dock, 2010. In 2013, the City Dock master plan. Out of the City Dock master plan, there is a cultural landscape report as well as a cultural resource hazard mitigation plan. And then the TAP that was just finished, reclaiming a local and national treasure. So we have enough plans, we have the vision, and we have the direction. Where we've had a real challenge as a community is moving forward. you know, it's interesting. You look at all these documents, look at all this planning, look at all this effort, and yet we seem to not be able to move forward. There was an article on the Sunday New York Times about Baltimore. I mean, I don't know, it was a week ago, and it was just the most, you finish reading this article, and you say, oh my gosh, we have no real problems. Because we don't. We have a problem of figuring out if we're going to move parking, how do we replace it and make it easier to get to? We have a problem of figuring out if we put some trees out there, how do we make sure when the boat show comes that doesn't interfere with them? I mean, we have a problem of figuring out how do we have an activity that attracts families? These are our problems. These are all solvable problems. And these are problems that, with the framework, which we have, let's take a look at the next one, we've identified 5 guiding principles out of all these documents. I've gone through them. 1, 2, 3 of them I wrote, so I knew them, which tells you how old these documents are. But the guiding principles are all something we can agree to. First of all, we all agree that we want to enliven the pedestrian environment. We want to have programming and an inviting public space for the community, and we want access to the water. So I think we would all agree to that. I don't think there's anybody that would say, no, I like it the way it is, much better to have trash and parking. Secondly, we always in planning start with do no harm. We have healthy businesses and a healthy residential community. Whatever we do, we want to make sure that we ensure the future health of our businesses and their viability, as well as commit to the livability of all the adjacent neighborhoods. We keep what we have that's good, we strengthen it. We do no harm. Next, provide new accessible parking options with any relocation of parking. What that says is we're not going to remove parking without providing an easy option for people, because the plans never go forward if you talk about removing parking and not giving the businesses the parking they need. Number 4, preserve and enhance our maritime heritage. In addition to our maritime heritage, our authentic character, the view sheds, and we do this by honoring the existing building envelope and maritime focus. That doesn't mean that through resiliency efforts there may be some slight change in height to adjust for that, but we are not looking in our effort to change the mass and scale. And then last, and perhaps most immediate, reduce the flooding at City Dock immediately, while implementing a long-term comprehensive resiliency effort. So the guidelines are our framework that each team is going to work from. And when you look at the teams, you've got 9 teams. And I'm just going to ask the teams to raise their hand as we go through the topics. Architects, design, placemaking. We got architects here, thank you. The financial tools, got developers, financial experts. Parking, pedestrian, bike connections, right over here. Parking experts, bike enthusiasts, programming, artists, musicians, people from the community. Maritime, all of our maritime experts. Resiliency, Berta's House, and business property owners and retail. You guys are over here. We've got a bunch of businesses. And the community, character, benefits, and livability, our residents. Great, thank you. So looking at these teams, we are tonight that yellow circle. That's the Action Committee workshop. So out of the Action Committee, the direction goes to the working teams. The working teams then, I can do the next one. Brennan made this. I'm delighted with this chart. I sent him little scribbled up pieces of paper, out of which came this great chart. So you see your action teams along the bottom. You'll not only interact with each other, but you'll have to inform other teams. For example, design, the shape of the space will inform what programming wants to do. Resiliency, the needs for the resiliency will inform the financial tools group. So you're interacting internally, but you're also interacting with each other. Everything feeds back up to the Action Committee. And in addition to the Action Committee, what you'll notice, those black circles are community outreach. As the mayor had just pointed out, we're going to have 2 large community outreach meetings, but a lot of other community outreach, both in terms of, we have in 2 weeks a workshop with Ward 1. We're going to try and have the same kind of thing with the business groups. And we're going to ask each one of the teams to identify how you think you can bring other people, their ideas, into this effort. So what's our objective? The objective is very specific: to establish a strategic framework with clear direction and specific action items to empower the city to move forward and implement the ULI recommendations. Again, this is not a plan. Each table has a list of expectations over the next couple of months. And your expectations are to first identify the opportunities. Secondly, what are the challenges? And in addition to the challenges, what would be unintended consequences? Third, outreach. How is your group going to outreach, or how can you participate in the larger community outreach efforts? And then the final products. 5 specific actions that the city can initiate in 6 to 12 months from each team. 5 actions that the city can fund and undertake within the next 5 years. And the results. How will the actions your team recommends, how will these make the experience at the city dock more inviting and more accessible to the larger community? So each group will come back at the end of May. A couple of the groups will come back a little bit earlier because we're anticipating a workshop again mid-May to share the design of the city dock, because that'll inform what a lot of the other teams do. So you basically have 2 months to think about this and to get very specific, and then over the summer, we're going to mesh the various ideas. So with that said, this is a very modest picture. This is Portland. What does Portland have that we don't have? Very, very little walkway all around the waterfront. So with that said, we ought to be able to minimally move forward on some of these ideas. And with that, I'd like to have Bryce and Michael Beatty talk about some of the exciting aspects of waterfronts around the country. Bryce.
Okay, we're going to see some images and have some things to talk about. Just a qualification, we're not proposing any of these exactly in Annapolis. It's simply to speak to the quality and the built environment opportunities that are there for Annapolis and City Dock. So I'm going to get started with a couple, and Michael's going to join me. A lot of the components that you find in all these places around the world, and I really enjoy studying this, it's amazing how you see different seating opportunities now in places than there used to be. Everything from hammocks to swings to, I was in Moscow 18 months ago, and I was amazed that in downtown Moscow, even there's swing sets on the sidewalks. And this has kind of gotten to be a universal thing, but really softscape, hardscape, and landscape that works together. Seating is an important part of it. And with the right materials, authentic materials, it can be really, does a lot in terms of helping with the placemaking. Next slide. Some other details and features that we want to see. Water. Water is an important component. Obviously, we have lots of water in City Dock, but there may be opportunities for fountains as well. Fountains have a magical way of attracting people. It's something to be considered. It can be very sculptural, like the one on the bottom right. Very cool. Lighting. Lighting is, of course, very important as well. You can get the warmth of a place. You can get, things can transform from daytime to nighttime with great lighting. And I think it's something to think about. So these are all just components that we think could be important at City Dock, and that the design work group and other groups will be working on, and your ideas tonight will be appreciated. A couple other waterfront developments that we'd like to share with you. Portland, Maine, Eileen spoke about already. A lot of nice things happening there. It's amazing what landscaping does, and just taking care of flowers and greenery. And I think every city in America is getting better at this. And we've got to make sure we have the opportunities to make it great around City Dock. Savannah, Georgia. Again, I think one of the things that a lot of these slides represent are relatively narrow, walkable spaces, but with great landscaping, a lot of greenery, very approachable at different elevations, a layering, if you will, of the public space, the public realm. And this kind of placemaking makes such a difference. It's not about the buildings alone, the area between the buildings, between the water's edge and the building. So these are the things that we really think can be improved upon. And I'm going to ask Michael to talk about this one and some of the next slides. We're going to kind of tag team this.
Thanks,
Michael
Chris.
Beatty.
Hi, my name is Michael Beatty. I'm a developer from Baltimore. And I spent the last 25 years building predominantly two projects, one called Harbor East and one called Harbor Point. And we built about 7 million square feet on those projects over 25 years. And now in Baltimore, they generate the highest rents, the highest occupancies. They have hotels ranging from Courtyard and Marriott Hotel to the Four Seasons. They have office buildings and other things in there. They also have a lot of residential, a lot of other stuff that's mixed in. And really what has made the project successful is that it's a neighborhood, that we really built a neighborhood where people live, people want to live. And also what really makes it successful, and what is the key to this project here as I look at it, is not only recognizing what's needed or what's missing, but really recognizing what we have. And when you look around at a lot of the images you'll see before this, a lot of the images that you've seen in future slides that will come up, you will see projects that are trying to create a feeling. You'll see projects that are trying to create an image or create something, and what they're trying to do is copy something and really make something that isn't necessarily there. But you can't recreate the waterfront. You can't recreate the history of Annapolis. You can't recreate the buildings that we have downtown. And most importantly, it's almost impossible to recreate the feeling you get of walking around a city like Annapolis. So it's critical to do that and to really get that kind of value. And what I've found in developing our project over time is that when you make the project work for the people that live the closest to it and live around it, and you make it work for the people that are going to live in a little bit broader range as they come in, you also become appealing and attractive to other people that want to come and see it. So you don't have to aim at a tourist environment and say we're trying to bring tourists in. You really need to aim at the folks in this room and everybody else that cares about Annapolis because they live here. So getting there and getting those things done can be challenging. When you look at these projects and you try to do things over time, like we did over 25 years, we recognize that at the end of the day, things like a grocery store is really, really valuable for a neighborhood amenity. It makes it a better place to live, a better place to work. But it's hard to get that right away. So it's also good to think about programming and how you bring in different tenants, how you get the right mix of tenants in there that long-term works, but also how do you get there over time. And on the screen in front of you is something that we did at Harbor Point. Harbor Point it's next to Harbor East on the waterfront, about 30 acres. About a third of the site is open public space, or will be. It has the headquarters of Exelon sitting there in the background, big, massive office building. One thing that's good about a developer here living in Annapolis now, which I do, is I know exactly what to avoid from developers in Annapolis. But Baltimore is different. It has a lot of big buildings, a lot of headquarters there. But we also had tenants that were going in now, and we're going to be building this project over the next decade. So you need to get some interim uses. Getting people to a site to experience it, to enjoy it, not only gets better use of the site today, but it actually helps generate, if it's the right traffic, better business for the other tenants that are there. So if you think about it, you think about a restaurant in downtown Baltimore, the city of Baltimore, in the CBD, the Central Business District, was literally dead in the evenings because it was only office. There was no residential there. So the types of tenants that were there were serving breakfast in the morning to office workers and maybe lunch in the middle of the day, but that was about it. When you look at Harbor East and Harbor Point, there's office mixed in with residential, and the restaurants serve breakfast in the morning. They serve lunch in the afternoon to office workers, and they serve dinner to the evening to the folks that actually live there. And getting more amenities that make it a better place to live, whether it's a pharmacy, a grocery store, a great restaurant, health club, all of these things make it a better place, but they're synergistic on themselves. And sometimes it takes a while to get them, but sometimes you can do things what I would call temporarily. So at Harbor Point, we did something called Sandlot, which is sitting here on the screen. And what is Sandlot? Well, we're on a peninsula of water. We've got 30 acres. We literally said, what would make this kind of unique, and what's kind of unique for Baltimore? And I would say we faked it a little bit because we trucked in a lot of sand, and we built an entire beach on the waterfront. But we did not want something that was just a hangout bar. We wanted something that appealed to families. So we really focused on getting great food and beverage there. We have one of the best chefs in the country, James Beard Award winner. And we set up a restaurant and a cafe on the water, but also put in bocce courts, 6 beach volleyball courts, a playground for kids, little hanging swings and things. And it really became a place for people to come to on the waterfront. It is absolutely open to the public, so much so that if you're not going to Sandlot, you can still walk right in front of Sandlot, grab one of the chairs on the waterfront, and just sit down and enjoy our waterfront because you're a citizen of Baltimore or you're a tourist. So it's very open and very welcoming. But what it does is it brings more people to the site today as we develop the site out. So getting these type of amenities in here as temporary uses can be very appealing and very attractive, but they can be done in a way that is specifically Annapolis. I would never say that doing Sandlot in Annapolis is necessarily a good idea, but doing Annapolis' version of something like this that makes it a nicer place to come now, it might be a short-term use, that utilizes the waterfront, gets you experience the waterfront, and gets more people down on the waterfront, is a good thing. And I think it's coming up with what the right use is and what is the Annapolis version of Sandlot that ties back to our waterfront heritage and history we have here. When you look forward and look at some of the other images here, there's lots of other cities that have done great things along the waterfront. But again, one of the things that I find ironic, when you look at development around the country, people are building things like town centers. And they're building them out in suburbia, and they're doing it to try to create the feeling that we have right here in Annapolis. We have living, working, shopping. We need more convenience items for people that live downtown, like a grocery store. But they're trying to recreate something. And a lot of these images have great pieces of them, but as Bryce said, don't look at them as that what should be done at our waterfront here in Annapolis. As you go through, you can see images where they're activating the waterfront. They're getting, whether it's boats and things, but getting people close to the waterfront is really important. Having different experiences when you walk along the waterfront is very important. If you're a resident living here and you go down to the waterfront, you don't necessarily want the hustle and bustle everywhere you are. It's really nice to find a really quiet spot to sit down, whether you have your dog or just by yourself, you read a book and sit on the waterfront and watch the sunrise or sunset. So you want those different experiences. And there's projects like in New York City, the High Line, where they create different environments as you walk along. And these images create different images that you see. Again, green spaces along the waterfront. We built the Harbor East project, and its green space was really hustle and bustle, vibrant streets, and the waterfront itself. And it really missed an opportunity to create green space. So at Harbor Point, our real anchor for the project is half of the entire 30 acres is open public space, a third of that being true park space along the waterfront. So that really here, getting enough park space in the waterfront is really important, and it can be magical if it's done the right way. Again, different images, and then sometimes they tend to I don't know if hokey is the right word, but they're trying to fake things too much. But again, it's creating the feeling of a waterfront. We don't have to do that much here in Annapolis because we have such great history and great feeling. But making it a different space that people can enjoy is really important. Seaside, Florida, community development on the waterfront. There's one on here that I'm curious to get to. Is Udo Vans. This one. Bowen's Wharf, Newport, Rhode Island. Not Baltimore, not Annapolis, but it has some uniqueness to it. And some of the things that I personally find great about Annapolis is the scale of Annapolis. And when you stand in the city and you go over to the Marriott and look across the waterfront, you have big buildings in the Naval Academy behind. The Naval Academy is the Naval Academy, and it's almost meant to be big. It's kind of this big thing. And then you have the scale of the city that is not just about height, it's about how things are broken up, but it's also about how they're twisted. When you look down the streets, you actually see the front of one building and the side of another building, an angle of another building, and it creates this kind of nice feeling to it as you go along. And those type things are what makes the city precious, and those are the types of thoughts that need to go forward into whatever is done on the rest of the site down the city down. And I kind of like in the images up here, even though they're not necessarily on the top screen representative of our city, they show a collection of buildings, and I think that can be very powerful. So again, I think from my perspective, I'm excited to offer any assistance I can to this project. I live here now, so I'm passionate about Annapolis. And I think it's a matter of being thoughtful about creating an environment that really does appeal to locals and brings lots of locals down to it. And if we do that right, we'll enhance the tourist experience in the area downtown as well. But doing it in a real manner that really does recognize not only what we don't have, but what we have. I'm excited to be a part and help out anyway I can. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So you all now have 30 minutes. 30 minutes. I will come around with a whip. You get with your groups. I think everybody should be able to find their table. Give us your thoughts. Give us your ideas. And then when you report out, you have 3 to 5 minutes. Again, to tell everybody you're going to be concise and to the point. Thank you very much and good luck.
We're going to have to do anything with zoning, or we're going to have to, everything that goes into a community, it can impact that.
So one of the things that we talked about during the comprehensive plan,
We started programming our summer concerts this year and put all the different wards.
One of the things I always explore.
Maybe one we could add to that on the same vein.
You're really at the apex of all of it. So I guess I would,
to the extent that resiliency is talking about a kind of response, I think we need to look at prevention.
Right,
if you
right.
want.
Yeah, I don't think response. Yeah, I think, right. Here are the bullet points that were submitted to me. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Susan.
That could be used for other, for business owners or for employees, or those people should not, in my opinion, be parking on Main Street. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, you have to do that. Yeah. And that chart was a little more complicated than what I thought our task was before tonight. The last time I talked to Eileen a few days ago, the basic plan for our group was to develop a plan together that would have approximately 3 community-wide meetings.
That aren't directly downtown that might want to have a small, flexible pop-up or a satellite, at a time that they think works for them. You know, maybe it's a Sunday market, maybe it's just weeknights in the summer. They're going to know what works.
But you want that high end for locals to feel good about coming downtown, buying a piece of art from Jeff. Or, you think of the businesses that you want, and what is it that they need to survive?
Because one of the first things they did was to look at all the parking by the city. And if you look at the utilization rates of garages, there's a lot of stuff that's uneven. Right? I think,
or it's, the Constituente Festival for that one, that segment of time. But somebody needs to be thinking about, it needs to be intentional.
That's what wound up happening here. That's what brought stuff.
So I think the other thing we have to recognize is that a good bit of this has to stay open for the boat show. But that can be utilized as a farmer's market.
Years are to create a larger space out there.
I think we'd have a hard that might be a permitting challenge. Yeah, right. I think that's where we'll really be pushing. We'll just dream.
It's worth exploring, but
so is this
floating docks could do a lot there.
So is this concept the idea that you were kind of creating a marina environment to replace this? Is that
in relation to the city as a whole? But I mean, obviously, the old timers weren't stupid. They built on the highland first, except for the seaport.
We charge a fair bit for the mooring balls, right? $35 a night. And there's no launch service. There's a water taxi that you pay for, but there's no launch service.
I do like the parade that's on the agenda already.
And to get people to be excited about showing up. So maybe getting flyers.
I would be happy to design. I'm a designer, so I can design a flyer. That's helpful.
There we go. Door flyers go a long way.
They do.
I had to. It was right in the face. I mean, it was
Comes and goes.
But it is exercise machines.
These are some of the things that can be done short term with the top.
You probably even experiment with some of it with floating docks. I was down there. There have to be other businesses to draw the people down there to make me want to.
Right. Is it possible to have like a temporary, kiosk or pop-up or temporary, seasonal?
Parallel parking, that could include a number of handicap spots.
All they have to do is lease the air rights.
Yeah.
They keep the air rights above it. Yep.
We have to have handicap accessibility.
Exactly. Right. In fire trucks.
They're trying to do the corners real slow. So needs better access.
Can I get everyone's attention? We're going to start reporting out. The first group to report out will be the Maritime group. They look highly organized. Susan and Terry, come on up. Okay, face forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Eileen. I'm Terry Lomax, and this is Susan Zellers. We have just an hour, whatever it was, 20 minutes. Did two things. One is we did sort of what are the overarching points that we want to maintain or keep in mind. We want to focus on people arriving by water. We want to focus on water from land, another constituency, and we want to maintain the water as a backdrop for the city. Those are the three sort of overarching.
Photo ops, etc.
Photo op.
Okay, so as Eileen pointed out, we have a certain amount that we want to protect as we're moving forward with maritime. We want to protect the commercial activity. We want to protect the transfer from boats to land. So whether it's coming aboard on a dinghy, ADA access, or what some cities have, which is bump and run, where they can just run in and grab something or people or whatever, an area where that can be accomplished. We want to protect the boat shows, make sure that they can continue. It's a huge economic engine for the maritime industry. We want to protect the events that enhance the maritime. Do not inhibit those moving forward that can actually enhance the maritime industry. Transient docking. We don't know exactly where or how we would increase that or how we would make that so that we have more access for taxiing and keep bringing people in and out from the mooring fields. But definitely want to make sure that we protect the transient docking. For opportunities, we want to become more welcoming to voters. That's something we put a star next to because we can begin doing that now. The harbor master does a great job, but there's not enough sometimes, especially on busy weekends. How do we really enhance this and make sure that we're welcoming to all the voters as they come into the dock? Remember, you don't have to think about parking for voters. It's a great thing. They just all come in by boat. Enhanced transient docking, again, we talked about it up here, but we have an opportunity to do that even more. And to showcase the maritime industry, about how to get on the water, and the history of what we had there in that city dock, how long we've been building boats on that piece of land, making sure that that story gets told as people come in. And then we have a question about a chandlery. What things does that transient boater need? That's something we want to explore as we move forward. What else can we have that the boater needs immediately? Not maybe a full-blown store like we used to have, but maybe the harbor master carries some things that the transient boater needs. And that's it.
Great, thank you.
Just remember, we have constituency that arrive by water, and we have a constituency that want to see and have access to the water. It's not just about being on city dock, it's about the experience coming to city dock by water.
We need to go later.
Okay.
We're still drawing.
Finance.
I don't need one. The Finance Committee, we have a discussion about parking. Old habits die hard. We have a number of ideas, but the problem we have is we don't know how much you're talking about and what you want to do. But once you all figure all that out, we've got some ideas that we think we could apply. We've got some advantages going forward. Number one, the Naval Academy wants to do something about flood mitigation. We ought to be able to leverage their money with some of our money. Make them a partner with us. The same thing goes with the state. You know, there's one thing. We're the only state capital in Maryland, right here. And we ought to take advantage of that. And fortunately, the legislature has seen wise to do that with a pilot this year. But there's no reason for capital projects we couldn't dial into that same philosophy. And after all, how much has the state spent on moving sand around in Ocean City over the years? We're the state capital. We deserve some of that largesse. And we can also leverage private development with the utilization of tax-exempt bonds through special taxing districts. It's something that we've done in other jurisdictions around here, and I think that could work. Business improvement district is another idea. Get public-private partnerships, but also utilize a business improvement district. And then you all are talking about lots more activity downtown. Well, we can charge some user fees for those additional activities, like, hey, more people bringing their boats downtown and docking them. Well, we can charge some additional fees there. The hotel tax, just waiting to be there. The best thing about the hotel tax is nobody in this room pays for it. It's the poor suckers that come in and want to be with it that pay. So that's a nice source of revenue to help support whatever infrastructure needs to put in. And lastly, Gavin, I couldn't help myself. Once we build that Ferris wheel, we can charge per revolution.
Dan, resiliency. That's a tough act to follow.
Really? No kidding. No, seriously, I'm not following that.
Programming next, then business.
Ironically, what I really do for a living is finance, so I appreciate all of it.
matter what you pay for, it's all going to be underwater in about 30 years. Just kidding. Actually, no, I'm not just kidding, and that's the point. That has to be considered in everything. So the very last thing we talked about was resilience must be included in every plan that comes out of here, or it will all be underwater. We can't just deal, so the graphic on flooding and the numbers, they're a little misleading. Sometimes that flooding is Compromise Street being underwater or a little bit underwater. Sometimes it is Hurricane Isabel coming in and that water going all the way up towards Main Street. And so flooding means something very different. Sometimes the flooding is coming from the state capitol and down the hill. Sometimes the flooding is coming from the bay and up the hill. Sometimes it's doing both. And if that happens, you got to have different systems for dealing with that. Some of those systems have to be gray. In other words, they have to be pipes and tunnels and those types of things, or walls. Some of them, a lot of them, have to be green. And we're going to solve this problem. So resilience, by definition, requires thinking very, very comprehensively. It means thinking now, it means thinking midterm, and it means thinking long-term. And you have to have an engineering solution for that, and you have to have a finance solution for that. So the opportunities, it depends on how you think of CityDoc. One of the opportunities that we have with CityDoc is it apparently doesn't have any value to the city. Look at it. It can't possibly be worth anything. Look at it. It doesn't have value. Obviously, I'm joking. Sort of.
I got it.
Yeah, thank you. I wrote that out for like 5 minutes. I thought I was going to handle that. But that is actually an opportunity, because if it was all entirely developed and you had to raise it up 9 feet, that'd be very expensive. But it's not developed. So we have an opportunity to do something with it that can actually protect the things that we really do value that are behind it. So we had to think about the CityDoc as a buffer, and then buffering CityDoc. We have to think about both of those things. Everything we do has to consider resilience. We also think that the relationship with the Naval Academy is an opportunity. We didn't go so far as to say we want their money. If you've seen the budget for the Naval Academy, you probably wouldn't be getting real optimistic about getting their money. But the cooperation and the understanding that dealing with this problem together means that just geographically and spatially, we have a much better chance of solving our problem. So it's not as bad as it looks, but that's because we're all the way up here. We were having a meeting down there. It'd be really bad. So anyway, resilience has got to go into everything. We came up with absolutely no solutions in 20 minutes. But we have 2 months, so we'll have to.
So we were the fun group because we get to think of what to do with all this space. This was a collection of people who were involved in both the historical preservation, in performing arts, and in visual arts, in other uses that CityDoc has currently, like a Corvette show. And what we want is a flexible, multi-use space that can accommodate both planned and spontaneous activity. So you could have a festival going every weekend, but when there's not a festival, there would still be, sculptures that children could climb on. There could be places for people to sit and look at the water. We think it's very important that there should be a way for the public to interact with the water and not just look at it. We have the chance to educate the public about history and the water. If you look at what's down there now with the Haley Memorial, that's a very good example of what can be done. That we need to create gathering spaces for our city. I said one of the things I loved about Annapolis was my kids used to go downtown and eat ice cream. And I don't know of another city in America where the kids can do that. So I think that's really, really important. I call it instructions. Those were our opportunities. Constraints, money, climate, some reallocation of parking, and then we think there's a need for an entity that would provide for intentional programming. So it's not just who can get to the permit first. There should be some thought as to what programming needs to go down there that reflects us as a city, and who is going to oversee all that. And then finally, expectations that Market House would be connected with the rest of CityDoc with something other than a parking lot. We realize there will be some parking, but there could be flexible parking. The use of existing buildings to educate and inform people about Annapolis. And again, building a city that has a gathering space for static and spontaneous programming.
Fantastic. Entities, great.
Okay, the business group, we had a true brainstorming session here, and we kind of followed the rules, but we're all over the map. Let me just run through this, and if I miss anything, jump right in. One of the things we've started with is the opportunities we need to make it for locals, have businesses down there that the locals can use. We need to improve the performance for the existing retailers down there. Retailers can't make it throughout the year. There was talk because of better parking. There's a need for the challenge to make it during the winter, because the winter months, a lot of things shut down and a lot of the retailers really struggle and they can't go there. Customers can't get there, and that brings us back to parking. We talked about the need for an anchor. If there was some type of anchor retailer down at the end of City Dock to bring people down. And that also led to a bigger discussion about specialty retailers and destination retailers. We talked about some retailers on Main Street and in the area that have people that always come, like the Irish store, some of the art galleries. People, it's a destination, so people will come, and then that helps the next door neighbors, the retailers there. We talked about a need for the interconnectivity of anything that happens in and around City Dock with the other elements of downtown Annapolis, but some of the other economic development projects that could be happening in Eastport and on some of the other surrounding areas. A real interesting discussion was about the sidewalks. Fix them now in the short term, because that could make it a little bit more compelling for people to go there. And on the Compromise Street side of City Dock, there is no sidewalk, but there's multiple property owners. So if we get them to agree to have the sidewalk to go there, you start to have a nice walk around the whole place. The other thing, there was a big disconnect for what we were calling like the loop. When you walk down the side where the dockage is, you get to the park, you get to the end, and you don't want to go back over to where Latitude is and some of the other things. Again, the sidewalks are all crushed up. So if that could get improved in the near term, it could get people flowing around in a much more pleasant experience. Potential businesses that could get over there. We talked about retail boating or recreational boating. Get that to get people. We're talking about people getting into the water, but make that a spot right there on the City Dock where they can do that. Satellite locations. I think some of the other groups talked about that a little bit. But have like pop-up opportunities, and maybe make those pop-up opportunities available to existing Annapolis businesses, so they get the first shot at doing that. And they also know the demographics and who the customer are. And that ties into the festivals and other activities so people could come. And again, destination retailers. How much space is actually available downtown? You know, how much is there now in terms of retail space? How much could be built? That was another question that came in. And I made a note there, we may be able to do that analysis through some GIS technology and understand what's available there. Some challenges that we identified: no consistency in ownership. There's a bunch of different landlords and landowners down there that have different interests, and I know it's hard to get them together to get together on a particular project. But the other thing we talked about is how do we get those landowners to buy into the vision that we're going to create. And that led to the next question: who are the landowners? We probably all know them, you know, but do we have the actual list and communicate with them? So that was something else that came up. Improve linkage with the Naval Academy, so we're working on that already. Joe's in the group here. And a couple other things. Unique stores, we talked about that, specialty retails. What kind of space requirements? What does a specialty store need? Nowadays, you know, the retail and leasing has changed a lot. Well, what does a small specialty store need? A small space. And that was something that was talked about a little bit. How to create a different kind of space. That was what I just talked about, to have flexibility. And I think we heard that discussion over there, to give businesses and retailers potential to have some flexibility. And we kind of came back to parking again, surprising. But a really interesting conversation dealt about phasing and linking whatever is going to happen at City Dock to the Hillman Garage. Because when you think about it, what we're talking about, what's the problem? The problem is, you know, fixing up City Dock, but it's parking. So if we're going to do something in City Dock, what does that do? Take away parking. So we're going to find some other parking. Well, we use Hillman Garage, we're going to fix that. So there's a phasing and linking idea that needs to be kind of put together. educating about parking, using the data. Where is the parking now? Real simple. There's a lot of communities that have apps, so that might be something that could get developed in the near term. We talked a little bit about some events. European holiday market was an idea that came up, making space available for the pop-ups, and bringing back the farmers market, more retail for boaters. That was talked about a little bit by the So there was a lot of nice overlap. We know we have a lot here. We decided we could go for another 2 hours with ideas and opportunities. But I think as this group breaks out, we're going to have an opportunity to kind of do a deeper dive on a lot of those things.
Fantastic.
So we are the parking, pedestrian, bike connections.
The transition.
Yeah, so we have anything to talk about. I think it's fair to say, and the group will tell me if this is correct, I think it's fair to say that one of the overarching philosophies that came out of the group is that we want to be practical so that something can be done. That there has been an inclination to try to boil the ocean and to do things too big and to bite off too much, so we would rather do incremental things and actually get something done than to do nothing. So under that heading, one of the opportunities we identified is to, first of all, optimize the existing spaces that we have. We were on a transportation committee a long time ago, and that was another recommendation. There is a lot of parking around, it's just not well optimized. Some of our opportunities kind of overlap with each other, because when you look at how to optimize the parking, you get into technology for pricing and communication. So flexible pricing, perhaps seasonal pricing. The technology exists today to make that fairly seamless and flexible. Being able to tell people where parking is another very powerful way, and it's done all over the country today. It's not a big lift, it's just something that it's an opportunity for us. There might be some ways to incentivize some of that through contractual arrangements with the parking operator, so they're actually incentivized to optimize the parking spaces rather than to perhaps optimize the financial side of it. We did talk about Hillman and wanted to also say yes, rebuild Hillman and rebuild it in a way that it's future-proofed. The autonomous vehicles and mobility as a service models are coming. They will be here within the time horizon of a parking garage. Parking garage lasts a long time. So if we make that investment, and we felt like that's something that absolutely ought to be on the table, to do it in such a way that is designed for flexibility to serve a lot of different uses over the course of the lifespan of a parking garage. The other thing that I wrote down is phased and flexible. So we concur with what you all had to say. Look at this as a phased approach so that you could begin to get sensitive to what it would be like to perhaps begin to alter, perhaps remove some of the parking, reallocate there's quite a lot of pavement space here, but do it in a phased and flexible sort of a way. And then the last thing that we would be remiss if we didn't note is to do all of that while being cognizant to access and the needs of the business community in that area. And so that's something that we always want to keep paramount in our mind. But I guess I will personally say I think that's all very doable. Anything else?
Back to the resident.
Dear Dad, please stand. So we are the Community Benefits, Character, and Livability Committee. Really our overriding goal as representatives of residents, there are 8 of us back here, is to make Annapolis a community for life, no matter where in life you are. What we really are doing in order to accomplish this objective is we're an outreach committee. And we are focused on outreach, also to build transparency in the whole process amongst the residents of Annapolis. So here's our path, and we're 8 residents. We didn't focus on what Dick Hillman's hobbies are, because I'm sure if we focus just on one resident's hobbies, none of us want to live in Annapolis. Not that picking on him, but we're not focused on our specific interests. We're focused on how we're going to provide forums to the residents of Annapolis so that we can collect their input on character, livability, and community benefits. So to do that, we're going to organize 3 different community meetings, potentially more, depending on how things progress. Looking at the timeline, that's basically one every other month. The immediate one that's already on the schedule is the Ward 1 Residents Association meeting on the 2nd of April at Fed House. As you know, that's a pretty small space, and it won't fit all of the interested residents of the downtown historic district. So we'll probably be hosting a second one more broadly at a place like the Market House. We've also talked about a following one over in Eastport, and then we're also going to have a fourth or a third somewhere else in Annapolis, potentially right in the space right here. This is pretty nice. The whole idea of those forums will be just like Eileen did with Bryce, it's in an executive way, cast the ULI study to residents who aren't familiar with it, and so we can set the balance for the discussion and the information we're trying to collect from them, so that they know, here's what we're trying to talk about, so that we can process the most valuable information in as short a time as possible. So we like Eileen's brief, we like Bryce's brief, we're going to take those products, we're going to kind of craft them into very easily digestible bits for the residents to get, for us to present to them in about 15 to 20 minutes and get right to a listening session. Probably listening and discussion, because critical in our success is being plugged into every one of your committee's works, so that we know where you're leaning, and we already have a lot of ideas based on what you just said, so that we can guide the discussions the right way and be better at setting those bounds at each consecutive meeting. So we'll be trying our best to tie into your work as well, so we appreciate you guys helping us out so we can represent your ideas back to the residents. Again, the goal, increase and maximize transparency of the residents, be effective through outreach so that we can provide a very focused list of residents' inputs into the process that can be digested through ultimately through the steering committee. Thank you.
I'm going to keep it very short because basically what we want to do is, as the design placemaking committee, is to formulate things based on input from everybody else. And so we have a bunch of architects sitting around, and we can design anything.
We waved our arms a lot.
Well, we discussed it. But what we've heard a lot tonight from the other teams and the other committees, and we're incorporating that. What we are going to come up with is a design framework that includes kind of a layering. And the layering will go from the water's edge through flexible space in between to the built environment. Now, those are general terms. Water's edge, we can look at everything from to incorporate resiliency, the maritime, and other uses and functions. The space in between, flexible space there, everything from parking, loading, unloading, programming of space and events, as well as pop-up stores and other things. When you get to the built environment, we're talking about scale, design, we're talking about historic preservation, we're talking about sensitive infill. So that's what we're going to be doing as a design committee, and when we come back, we'll have a first draft of a framework that incorporates ideas we've heard tonight, ideas, feedback we get in an intervening time, and have more discussion then.
You guys are amazing. You're right on time. Yes. Fantastic ideas. You will all be hearing from your team leaders in the next week or so. I'll be contacting each of the team leaders. So your next couple meetings will be with your teams. Again, the end of April, we're looking at a large community outreach meeting. And mid-May, we will be having another action committee meeting. So fantastic. Keep going. Best of luck.